Great. Okay, cool. Thank you, Carolyn, and everyone at Retina for getting this set up. My name is Furuichi, and today I'm going to be talking about promoting data education and data science at a startup. Just some background on me. My name is Kira. I use she, her pronouns. I am the data scientist at Ritual. I am one of two people on the data team. My boss, Brett, is the director of data and analytics, and I work directly below him. Some things about me: I'm a fan of actionable data almost exclusively, all things related to LA because I am an LA native, and living up to my LA stereotype, obsessed with the environment and limiting my single-use plastic. So just some background on the company I work for. It's called Ritual, and our main priority is sort of taking the daily vitamin and reimagining it. We were started in 2016 and founded by Kat Schneider. And at our core, we are a direct-to-consumer subscription service for multivitamins, basically a health meets technology company that believes in science, traceability, sustainability, quality, and more. We first launched our first product, Essential for Women, which is pictured here on the right. And we've expanded our products across men's, women's, pregnancy, and teen products. I've been here for a little over a year and a half now almost, and it's been just an amazing experience to see the company grow and really sort of enter a new space. So today we're going to be talking about two of my favorite things, data and people, but I think more importantly, the intersection of the two and sort of what kind of implications that has for your company and your team. So just to highlight some motivation as to why Ritual, which is a pretty small company still, has a pretty robust data education program, and just walk through some of those. So first off being, prior to having data education at Ritual, we had a relatively inconsistent data usage across the company. So what I mean by that is we had a lot of people looking at data across the company in different departments, but consumption was rather shallow, and that there wasn't a lot of critical thinking necessarily happening on a daily basis or on a regular occurrence when it was really needed. And we had little to no predictive data. So it wasn't really complex, and it was really just the reporting and the basics that people needed. But that really stunts our growth in many ways. Secondly, it was really hard to pinpoint where people struggled with data because data skills varied across the company. We had people who were pretty much data novices, couldn't tell you the difference between a mean and a median, to people who were Looker experts and are better at using Looker than I am. So pinpointing where people struggled with data, specifically also within their teams, was really hard to distinguish. The third point is our business has been growing. We've been growing the number of products, we've been growing the team, we've been growing just the complexity and everything. As those problems become more challenging, the data becomes more complex, and being able to keep up with the changing data, changing infrastructure is really important. That sort of ties in with our last component, in that as we're growing as a business, we've hired more people, and sort of getting people up to date on how to use our data and what our data infrastructure is was challenging without having programmatic methods of getting people used to it. And it wasn't really scalable to just have one-off conversations like, oh, this is how you do this, or this is how we do Y here. So having something that could be repeated throughout the year or whatever cadence it needed to be was really important to us. So our primary goals in creating a data education program, there's three primary ones I would say. The first was just sort of to get an understanding of where our team's confidence was in using data, in their data literacy, and in their data empowerment, not just as individuals, but also on the team level, because at the end of the day for us, there are some teams where data is super important that they're looking at every day, and other teams where they may not need to be looking at it at that same cadence. The second point was understanding where data lies within teams' projects. So where is it happening at the beginning? Was it happening before a project even started? Or was it happening at the very end and having to sort of backfill things? That I think was a pain point for us too. So understanding that was really important. And the last point, obviously, is the whole point of this whole presentation, was creating this need-focused and data-driven curriculum for data education at Ritual. We obviously want to live up to our words, and if we're promoting data, we also want to have a data-driven approach to creating sort of this material. So we outlined as follow using qualitative feedback, quantitative surveys, to sort of really pinpoint people's strengths and weaknesses with data to create what we'll talk about in the second half of this presentation. Living up to our values of transparency, we also share results of people's data literacy and confidence company-wide, so people can see how they sort of evaluate themselves compared to the rest of the company. And much like when we develop models or whatever we're creating, we have an iterative framework, and we're always striving to create a better system for our data education and create better programming, better content. So learning with everyone else, but this is sort of our mindset in trying to do something like this at Ritual. So these are just some call outs from some of the surveys and qualitative feedback we have gotten in the past year or so. Big things are about using Looker, our BI tool, data basics, but then some more really interesting things is some people don't know how to follow a user throughout our different data sources and follow that journey. A lot of things related to project management, such as like, when does data belong in a project? Does data belong in a project? What can be a KPI? What can't? Those are really important questions that might seem obvious to people on the data team or people who are intimate with the data, but for a lot of people who might be novices or just beginners at it, I think it's something that we overlook. And lastly, also tied into that is some teams sort of identifying where they have opportunity to be using data and really leveraging it to their advantage. So given all of this, at Ritual, we created an educational framework for data education and data empowerment, which we call Data Office Hours. So Brett, my boss, and then Emma Wu, who is she leads our consumer insights team, and myself created a 4-point framework for how we envision data education at our company. So our 4 points are that our data education needs to be accessible, recurring, interactive, and rewarding. I'll dig into these 4 points on the next slide, but at its core, this, I think, lives up to our values of inclusivity and transparency as a company, and it's sort of how we define data empowerment. Okay, so the first point in that data needs to be accessible to people. Well, at the end of the day, we understand that not everyone needs to be a SQL master and not everyone's going to learn Python. We do want content to be simple and impactful enough for anyone who's interested to be able to come and learn. They may not be a data expert today or even be interested in data today, but a few years down the line or in the future, they could be someone who's leading one of the greatest minds in this field. So again, living up to our values, our company values, and I think personal values of transparency and inclusiveness, the content and programming should be able to be understood by anyone who attends. The second point, which I think is really important for us as a company, is that office hours are recurring for us in a really deliberate and organized schedule. I think a key point in having something recurring like this allows for, again, organized schedules, deliberate content, and sort of gives something people to look forward to. Also, when you formalize these lessons plans and agendas, you're really reinforcing the importance of data and data literacy within your company. And it sort of trickles down within teams. You know, if you're saying that the COO is really invested in these sort of efforts, that sort of lays down into the other team members. For us, we found that conducting office hours on an every other week basis for an hour is a really good cadence. It gives people enough breather room to not get sick of us, but it's also something sort of fun to take a break from your normal work. Our last point is that our data education and data office hours are interactive. So no one really ever wants to listen to people lecturing, kind of what I'm doing now. So one of the things we do is we try to incorporate fun and interactive activities such as games. We played, back when we were in the office, we played Data Jeopardy, and it was great and it was a really fun time. Another key aspect is we like to invite team members and sort of establish them as guest/expert speakers. This is really important because even though I'm on the data team and I have a lot of familiarity with the data, there are still people who, let's say people on the email marketing team, they're going to be experts in their data and have a much different view and perspective than I do on it. So having them come and present about projects or data that they're interested in or working with really allows for this more in-depth perspective that I'm not privy to, and just makes things more interesting and gets people involved, and it's awesome. The last point that's sort of tied into this idea of keeping things interactive and fun and light is this idea that these activities, at the end of the day, well, we would want everyone to be the best data person they are. There still needs to be some form of incentive. At least we found that for us. It's been really helpful at maintaining strong participation and a pretty loyal attendee base. So for us, we found that vegan baked goods are really great at getting people to show up. And so I would recommend, if you do implement something like this at your company or your team, you find areas of value that could really help people show up. Maybe that's lunch gift cards, or I don't know. Ours is definitely the vegan baked goods. I think people are missing them now that we're virtual, but we're trying to maintain incentives different way in this environment. For us, we also like to have these on a semi-regular cadence, so people can sort of not really predict when that's going to happen, just to keep attendance up. This is one of my favorite callouts in our Slack channel about some of the baked goods that we offer, so it's always a fun time. So given our framework, we're really able to accomplish a lot of things as a company. It's been awesome as a data team to see people's confidence grow, people asking really great questions, and sort of allowing for this really more advanced data opportunity at our company. So for us, we highlight 3 main areas that we cover in these data office hours. Obviously, programming can be very varied, and it's really pretty niche to your own company, but for us, we've highlighted 3 areas. The first is business intelligence, since at the end of the day, most people need a strong foundation in this. So this not only entails like just data foundational skills, also being able to use our business intelligence tool Looker. I like to think that it's actually not like riding a bike, and if you haven't used it in a while, it can actually be kind of difficult. So it's one of those things that people can come back to and come and ask us questions if they get stuck on a problem. It's a great opportunity for that. The second is consumer insights. I spoke about my colleague Emma, who leads our consumer insights team. So we often use time at data education office or data office hours to share out really interesting results from anything related to consumer insights and allow people to come with questions. The last point that I think many of us would be excited about is we used it as a platform to promote data science opportunities and projects. Given everything that we cover at data office hours and given everything that we try to promote within it, it really allows us to create a strong data foundation within our team members. And because of that, we enable them to advocate for themselves, their teams, and their requests. This might sound a little ambiguous, but we sort of at Ritual leverage this formalized data training to, first of all, understand where people are struggling and thriving with the data, and especially within teams. It really allows us to then sort of focus our curriculum and efforts to the specific areas. Another key point, I think, that is less related to the data science sides of things, but just on the pure data warehouse, data storage, data usage, is understanding which data people are actually using. If we're under the impression that a team is heavily reliant on X data, but it's actually Y data, that might allow us to change the framework of how we're showing that data, how it's being presented, and is really good feedback for us. The third point is it allows us to field data requests. The way we format office hours for the most part is the first half an hour is spent doing a formalized lesson plan, and the second half is just informal Q&A if they have one-offs. So being able to hear questions people might have allows us to understand, okay, this kind of project might be coming down the pipeline in a little bit, or we can answer this question quickly. It's a really great place for that to happen. The fourth point is one of my favorites, and I think it's really important as a company that 2 people on the data team are not solely responsible for all things related to data, and that there are other people at the company that can advocate for data and understand to it. So data office hours has been a great area to establish data leads and advocates within specific teams. And I think a lot of people that have been really loyal to data office hours and come very regularly have sort of established themselves within their teams as someone that can be reliant on with anything related to data, sort of as someone in between the data team and their own team. So it's been great having that. And lastly, using it as a platform to promote data projects and more complex data science initiatives. I think if we didn't have data office hours and this more formalized things, it would sort of be hard to democratize data science efforts. So that's been really, really great for us. So sort of how this happens in this cycle at data office hours is we like to expose people to data, whether it's through some sort of formal presentation or a guest speaker. So we expose attendees to familiar and unfamiliar data, projects, and opportunities so people can sort of get the ball rolling in their head and start brainstorming potential opportunities for them. The second phase that happens outside of office hours is obviously most of us know is data exploration, but we really like to think that's in the stakeholders' hands, and we really encourage individual analysis and critical thinking before our project even starts. Team members are highly encouraged and required to perform in-depth analyses and reports before our project. So that way everyone, not just the data team, has a really strong understanding of why we're doing this, why is data science appropriate for this, or maybe it isn't, and really learn from there together. And the last part is obviously kind of where I have a more hands-on experience is the collaboration between myself, the data team, and whatever team I'm working with. So once this exposure and exploration has happened, really connecting with them and embarking on the fun part, which is actionable data science at Ritual. So I know I've just talked a lot, but to sum everything up, if you do decide to implement formal data education at your company and team, or maybe you already have this, we tie it back to 3 main foundational principles. The first is being practice what you preach, discover where your team excels and struggles with data through quantitative and qualitative data. If we're asking people to be more data-driven and to promote data skills, we definitely want to ensure that we're living up to our values and tracking success and failures in as many ways as we can. The second point is, I'm just calling it black tie, but I definitely think it's important to keep data education formal, not formal in the sense that it can't be fun, but in something that is very accessible to your team with very detailed and scheduled lesson plans. It not only allows people to sort of determine which week might be more relevant to them or not, it really just reinforces the idea and the value of data at your company. The last one is definitely unique to your own team and your own company, but it's relying on your principles as a company, as a team, and as an individual to determine what values are important in order to flesh out an educational framework. Maybe it isn't important that everyone has access to data or is using data on a very regular basis, and maybe you don't even need everyone coming to office hours or whatever data education you implement. Just understanding where those values lie will help you sort of guide a framework to be the most appropriate one it can be for your team. So I think that's it. Thank you everyone for your time. And if you have any questions, please let me know. You can find me on LinkedIn or ritual.com if you're interested in seeing any of our products, but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kira, for presenting it. And to remind participants, there's a QA button. Go ahead and type your questions if you have any. I actually have one, Kira, if you don't mind me jumping the line. I love this framework. As someone who works in data, it's really crucial to make sure everyone is data literate at your company so the things that you're presenting make sense to them at some fundamental level. To move to more like a concrete example, what are some topics or conversations that you've had that your data team at Ritual has been evangelizing to those non-data people that you think is crucial to kind of like set the foundational level to have more intricate data conversations?
I think one of the great lessons that we've done in collaboration with our product team was something around A/B testing. I think a lot of people can have different frameworks and ideologies about A/B testing, and using data office hours and working with the product team to lay out how exactly as a team and a company we define it has been really helpful, not only for people that formulate ideas for the A/B test, but for other people who are interested to help generate ideas. It's again one of those things that is very unique to your own team and your own company, but has been really helpful. And I think helping the product team democratize to the company how they conduct A/B tests and what they learn from it, to people who are interested and people who aren't interested. So it's been great for us.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Great. Let's wait like a minute or so to see if anyone has any last second questions about Kira's presentation. And also for everyone in the audience, we will obviously be sending these slides afterwards. So if you want to go over Ritual and Kira's framework and you want to institute your own data practices, bring your own vegan cookies once we're out of quarantine, you can use Kira's notes. Awesome. It looks like we have a question from Corinne. The question is, how much time does it take to develop a clear lesson?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question. I would say if you do implement some sort of data education framework or initiative at your company, it's not this like half effort thing. We definitely spend hours planning these for some of the ones that are definitely more robust. You can definitely have your casual ones, I think, where you're just running through some tricks in your BI tool or whatever. But I think for the ones where you're, especially with if you're incorporating other teams and guest speakers, that takes some time to plan them out and coordinate with the other person. I would say on average, it probably takes me a few hours to pull something together. I obviously want it to be high quality since people are taking time out of their day to come and learn and spend time with me and whoever's presenting. So yeah, I definitely think that put effort into it and try to make it fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that answer. And I hope, Corinne, that was a sufficient response. Yeah, I'm thinking it's 6:30 right now. Kira, thank you so much for presenting. I think we're going to make a quick transition to Mo, who will be presenting next. Mo is a senior DataOps engineer at Retina. He will be talking about data engineering and deriving data value. And a fun fact about Mo is Mo has a coop of chickens, which he has nicely named the Cluckdashians. So if you have any questions about data engineering pipelines or how to raise chickens, Mo is the man to go to. But without further ado, please give it up to Mo.
Thank you, Adam, for that introduction and the fun fact. Also, thank you to Carolyn and Taylor for organizing CDS every month. I'm a frequent attendee, and this is actually my second time presenting. I'm very, very excited. Okay, so let's try to look for the share screen button.
Perfect. We can see your screen.
All right, perfect. So in this talk, I'm gonna tell you about DataOps and how it can be used to deliver business value from data. And I'll start with an origin story of what DataOps is and how it came about. So in 2017, a Gartner, which is a very large research firm, released a report that stated that 60% of data projects in the US were failing. And they attributed that failure to some sort of process failure, a technology failure, or a people and culture failure. And then 2 years later, that same firm, Gartner, released another report stating that this time that it's not really 60%, it's actually 85% of data projects that were failing on a regular basis by companies that were attempting them. And so it was actually during that time when a group of experts created a method for delivering, for solving that problem, for delivering data value, and they coined that methodology DataOps. And we're gonna talk about what it is and how we can use it to help make sure we are delivering value and not have our projects fail. And so before I start, let's see, why should you listen to me? I'm actually a senior DataOps engineer at Retina. And before that, I was a software engineer for many years in multiple industries. And throughout these software engineering years, I had the pleasure of working in using many different frameworks. So the Agile framework, the Waterfall framework, the Lean manufacturing or Lean framework, using DevOps, and right now I'm using the DataOps principles. And of course, here's how you can reach me. I will leave this information at the end of the slide as well, so you can, if you have any questions. Great. So this is DataOps in a nutshell. DataOps, this is the manifesto. This is what DataOps is according to its creators. And you can think of these 6 rules as ways of thinking when you are delivering data projects. And I'm gonna go through some of these. So the first one is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. That means that if you are in a project and you you're making a choice between creating a new process or talking to an individual, just favor talking to the individual. Do not create more processes. Working analytics over comprehensive documentation. That means that if you can deliver a project faster without documentation, do that. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. That means that in the beginning phase of a project, when you're really gathering objectives from your customer, do not focus on nailing down all the objectives from day one. Really collaborate with your customer and try to work out what value means to them in an iterative basis. Fifth is experimentation, iteration, and feedback over extensive upfront design. This is very close to the Agile methodology. It stresses that if you focus on scoping out your project from the beginning, you are inevitably going to fail. And so it is better to scope out very small experimental releases and get feedback from your business stakeholder multiple times to make sure that you're going to deliver a final product that is valuable to them. And then finally, cross-functional ownership of operations over siloed responsibilities. So it's better to have a unified data team than several data departments. Great, so let's dive into some of these. And I'm gonna talk about processes, technologies, and people. So let's start with the process side. Okay, so this is before DataOps. This is a very common process for delivering data projects. So starting from the left, you have a data collection step, a data munging step, a feature engineering step, a modeling step, and a value delivery step. And you have individual teams responsible for each step. This process is okay. This process, I don't see any problem with this process. The only thing I want to point out is these lines here, these walls, and these are called the handover walls. And these happen when you have one team that has, you have one team with no access to one side of the process, trying to get to the other side of a process. And so this is an example of what happens during one of these handovers. And you can see that on the left-hand side, well, if this was not more interactive, I would ask you to guess. But for those who guessed right, the left-hand side is a data scientist in this case, and they are trying to communicate over this wall, this handover wall, to a data engineer. And as you can see, they both have pure intentions. They're both trying to get their work done, but this overhead is causing friction in the project. This is another one that I want to dive in. Here, the left-hand side is a data scientist, and the right-hand side is a business stakeholder. And I hope you can recognize some of these thoughts that happen. This communication is very common, and DataOps really tries to avoid this. And the goal here is to focus on value and not effort. All right, so what is the solution? So this is the process after DataOps. So DataOps is about having a unified data team and using a unified data platform. And what that platform does is it allows a team member who could be specialized in one section of the process. So let's say a data scientist who is specialized in modeling, they could use this data platform along with collaborating directly with their data engineers in their team to get this part of the work done. So the data munging and the feature engineering. And so they can work together to get modeling done and deliver value. And on the other side as well, a data engineer should be able to do data munging and feature engineering, and then they can use the platform to do modeling and deliver value. And this platform would contain automated processes and frameworks for helping upskill or helping bridge skills gaps for individuals who don't have these skills. Sorry, I'm getting notifications. Okay, so yes, moving on. So here are the process takeaways from DataOps. So delivering data project is a team sport. So it's not about what you do in your specific field. It is really about the entire process and getting that process all the way to the business value. And business value should really be everybody's North Star metric. In a lot of the times, I read like job descriptions, and it's for a data scientist, and it claims that like you're going to be responsible for modeling, and you're going to be using data sets to run sophisticated models to deliver value to somewhere. And really, they should focus on the outcome, which is the value part, and not the effort, which is the modeling part. There's also very common in data engineering job descriptions where they say like, you're going to own this data, and you're going to work with the teams to get data to them. But they should essentially say that your North Star is to make sure that with that data that you're giving them, they're going to have some sort of business value. Third is time to value over magnitude of value. This is something that people struggle with. So the metric in value is actually the time to get to that value, and the size of the value doesn't matter. And so if you are a business stakeholder, it is more often than not that you would prefer to see value faster, even if it's small, than to wait a long time and get some magnificent like cathedral of value. And then finally, value is unlocked only at the end of the process. So really, this comes back to collaboration. Even if you are a superstar data scientist, you are only as good as the slowest piece of the process, because that is going to be the bottleneck of delivering value. So think about these things when you are in your projects. All right, next is the technology side. This is before DataOps, and I'm going to explain like what a lot of typical data infrastructures look like today. So here on the left, we see services, and these are front-facing services. They could be a mobile app, a web app, and some other web application. And these services are what interface with your customers, and they have these backend databases, these mini databases for every service, and these databases are they're called OLTP databases, and they are optimized for fast retrieval of data, and they're not really optimized for any analytical analysis. They don't even support SQL. And so day to day, you are in this world, and daily you have aggregations to a data warehouse where you store all of this data and it's aggregated into one unified place. There are many famous data warehouse vendors. So Redshift is a big one. Let's see, Google Query is another big one. And I forgot what the Azure equivalent is, but I'm sure they have a data warehouse. And so, okay, let's talk about what happens in this architecture. Here in this data warehouse, you have fixed schemas. And so if you have a table and you call it the orders table, the schema of that orders table is fixed, and changing it is very, very hard. And the reason it is very hard is because there isn't really versioning of tables in this data warehouse. And so if you change one of the tables, you are changing it for all of the services, you're changing it for all of the users, and you're causing a very risky change to the company, okay? And beyond that, this data warehouse has unified compute and storage. That means that if this thing goes down, it really affects the company horribly. And so you need somebody to make sure that it does not go down, because the consequence of it dying is catastrophic. And so, okay, let's look at the effects of the system. Here, errors are very expensive. If you make a mistake, you're affecting everybody in your company. And change is very risky, because again, if you do something and it causes this warehouse to go down, or you make a change and it affects another team negatively, it's very hard to go back because you do not have versions. And finally, you really need data gatekeepers. So to avoid these catastrophic incidents from happening, companies employ system administrators, data engineers, any data steward to take care of the data. And their job there is to take in data requests. Let's say you're a data scientist and you want to add a column to some table. You go and ask them, can I change the orders table to add this analysis, this predictive column, and they, to answer your question, they go and ask every single team in the company if that would affect them. And if it will affect them, then they're going to come back to you and say, no, you can't change it. You can't really do this change. It's going to negatively affect other people. And if it happens that it's okay, then they'll be like, okay, that's fine. But in any case, you have to wait for them to ask these things. Okay, and so this is after DataOps. This is another architecture. And in this architecture, you have this replaces your data warehouse. And here you have a compute layer where you're running your computations. That's exactly what it is. And a separate storage layer where you're basically putting any objects you can or you want to in here. This is like a data lake. For people usually call this a data lake. And then finally, you have a versioning, tracking, and orchestration system that tracks all the objects or tables that are in this storage layer and what happens to them as they go through the compute layer and come back down. And so here, you have dynamic schemas because this layer can take any sort of data. And it actually doesn't just take like tabular data. It takes in any artifact. It could take in models and model versions. It can take images, text. It doesn't really have any rules here. It accepts whatever you give it. And once anything is in here, it is immutable. So whenever you add something to this layer, you want to change it, it seems like you are changing it, but you're actually making a new version of the same thing. And so you can have multiple versions of data. And by data here, I mean anything that can be considered data. So models are data, artifacts, images are data, any sort of analysis is data. Even your code, you can save your code snippets as data. And to make this work, you apply functioning programming principles. So let's look at this flow here. Let's say you want to run an analysis. What happens is you go to your compute layer and you write up a script, a SQL script. You could be using a BI tool that is part of your compute layer. And that tool interfaces with the storage layer, takes in the data of the version that it wants, runs a function, so runs some analysis. You could think of your analyses as functions. So you run a SQL query that is a function, and then you get a result, and then you run another SQL query, and that is a function, and you get a result. And again, you run a third one, and you get some sort of value, and you drop it back in your storage layer as your final table. And here, anybody else can take that value and do something else with it. Great. So what are some of the benefits of this architecture? Here, errors are very cheap. And the reasons errors are very cheap is because of this immutability. So really, if you make a mistake here, you can just go back to the previous version. It's that simple. Data is democratized. And so because when you do change something, you're not affecting anybody else, then you're free to do whatever you want with whatever data you find. And you don't really need a gatekeeper to make sure that things don't go wrong. Finally, easy reproducibility. This is about this tracking and versioning and orchestration, because all data is tracked and all versions are kept. If you see an artifact or a final output, a final result, some sort of value, something of value that you want to replicate, all you have to do is backtrack how it was formed up all the way back to its rawest form and generate it again. And that is why it's very easily reproducible. All right, so some takeaways here. This was highly technical, but let's summarize it together. So the takeaways are we should try to de-risk and encourage change. And whether that is like a process change of avoiding gatekeepers in your own architectures, or if you are or redesigning your entire architecture, but you should take steps to de-risk change in your organization to make sure that your projects do not fail. Second is treat infrastructure like cattle, not pets. This is a very famous DataOps saying, you don't really care about cattle, but you care more about your pets. So here your data warehouse is a pet, because if it fails, catastrophic things happen. But if you have just a layer of compute and that fails, then you just spin up another layer. So it doesn't really matter too much. And again, this comes back to making change easy. Track everything. Yes, so if you track everything you do, data, code, models, results, even the relationship between these entities, you can reproduce things whenever you want, at will. And so this is simple. You just, tracking happens automatically using metadata, so you don't really think about it, and it is part of your architecture. So if you can track something, track it. Even if you don't have a fancy tracking system, you could start tracking things on Excel, on a wiki, just version control everything you do, and it'll help make you succeed and make your analysis reproducible. And then finally, discourage gatekeeping and encourage data democratization. If there's a process and you want to protect it, and you're protecting it by adding a human being, that human being is usually gonna delay things further. Versus if you protect it with some sort of like automated testing or an automated tool, that tool will only stop what is guaranteed to only do what it has to do. And so just think about that. And finally, the people side. So this is about change management and why these principles are not adopted widely yet. So this way I'm describing is a new way of working, and it's very hard to adapt to. And especially because you have the previous ways have been there for very long, and you have basically like older data scientists, you have like data engineers and data teams that claim that their way has been working for so long, so why should they change the way that they do things? And the way I'm describing requires expanded responsibilities and needs expanded skill sets. So I read on a lot of like data science blogs that go like, I'm working as a data scientist and my team is asking me to know how like deployment works. I'm an expert in modeling. Why should I care about deployment? Get somebody else to do it. And so if you add more people, you really add more blockages to the system. And so really think about expanding your skill sets and not focus on your specialty. Next, helper tools, workshops, and demos are required. So this is a brand new way of doing things, and it needs a lot of education. And so this links back very well to Kira's presentation. You really need to upskill and educate to get to where you need to get to, which is more business value. And finally, you need business buy-in to do this. You can't really do this as an engineer or as a data scientist. You really need buy-in at the C-suite level of the entire business to change these processes, change this technology, and unsilo people's responsibilities. Okay, but these are all negatives. Let's talk about what could happen to get it done. So really, if you focus on automation you could bridge the skills gaps that you have in your teams today. So you could have data engineers who do not know anything about modeling, but if you have a automated like AutoML framework in your data platform, they can use that to bridge the skills gap of modeling and deliver value. That's an example. There's a continuous need for helper tools or frameworks. So again, this comes back to the automation part. You will continuously find areas where your process is slowed down, and you should systematically identify these and see if you can have tools to help you accelerate them. It could be that your team is struggling with data quality, and once the process comes to like feature engineering or modeling, you are always like, I don't trust this data. The data quality is bad. So instead of focusing on hiring somebody to do data quality, really see if you can have an automated tool that would address these quality issues at the source. Finally, yeah, so have multiple demos, workshops, and examples. So hopefully, like this is an example of a talk about DataOps. So it's promoting DataOps. And then finally, it's all about collaboration here. So if a company is siloed, no matter what you do with the technology, no matter what you do with the processes, you're gonna hit the people bottleneck. So a recap of all the topics I discussed. So what DataOps is a methodology to deliver value from data, and it really talks about a way to deliver things both fast and accurately, and it involves multiple aspects, so a process aspect, a technology aspect, and a people aspect. But if you get the formula correct, they promise, and actually I promise that you will deliver more value in a shorter time, and you will be happier doing it and have less communication issues along the way. That's it for me. Thank you for listening. Here's how you can find me. And yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mo, on presenting this new way to think through data engineering and how to avoid a lot of those pitfalls that are common in data. As someone who works in data, I've said those things myself for sure. Also have a question for you. Obviously, data ops as a concept is new and exciting, and like you said, needs business-wide adoption. Let's say somebody's interested in moving towards this data ops framework. What is square one for them? What's the first step they can take wherever they are in the pipeline? Specifically data scientists, because that's typically the audience here, but anyone in the data team, how can they start to move towards this framework?
Yes, that's a good question. So if you are a data scientist and you want to start using these principles, the easiest place to start is what you can have control over. And as a data scientist, you have control over your deliverables to business stakeholders. And so what you can do there to eliminate this handover line is to focus on iteratively delivering very small value chunks to your business stakeholders. So let's say you want to have a big goal of reducing customer churn by 5% in the organization. Instead of running models for like 2 months and producing one big artifact at the very end that will hopefully wow the business stakeholders, try delivering immediately something of any sort of value, saying that like, here's an analytical analysis that is a step forward to our overall goal. And then here's a simple model that is not ready for production yet, but this is the value that I can offer today. And through that communication, you can, first, the business stakeholders are going to be very happy because they're going to see value immediately. And also you are not gonna stray away from the business goal 2 months later.
Awesome. That's really helpful, especially seeing how a data scientist can take a step forward today or tomorrow towards this much stronger framework. We'll wait. We're past the hour, which is great, but we'll wait a couple seconds to see if anyone has any final questions. Again, Mo, if you would throw back up your socials real fast so that we can so for both Kira and Mo, if you think of something late tonight that wakes you up and you need to talk to them, we'll send you their contact information, and we'll obviously send the recordings of this. Great. Yeah, so I don't think we need to keep everyone any longer. Again, I'd like to thank so much Kira and Mo for stepping up and speaking. Anyone in the audience, if you're interested in speaking, please reach out to Carolyn or Taylor. They are the superstars who put this together every month. I really appreciate it. Every month I learn something new. Every month I really feel blessed to be part of a CDS community. And I hope that you guys all get some value from this. But for now,